Hello and welcome to the GW Books Club. I am joined as ever by my good friend Stu. Stu, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. Looking forward to this one. Looking forward to this
Well,
one.
this is a
We
big
got
one,
there.
right? Because we
Yeah.
are going to be talking today about five Horus Heresy books, the first five books from the series. So we're doing Horus Rising by Dan Abnett, False Gods by Graham McNeill, Galaxy in Flames by Ben Counter, Flight of the Eisenstein by James Swallow, and Fulgrim by Graham McNeill. And we're going to be talking about this entire, we're probably not going to get too detailed because that's a lot of story, but we're going to be
Yeah.
talking about, the feel and the plot and the sort of storytelling of the
hmm
beginning of this epic Horus Heresy tale. Something that would go on to be what, 60 books? It's about that many, right?
Yeah. I can't remember if the initial main storyline is 54, 56, something like that. And then you've got your Siege of Terror
Sure,
extra
which is his
section on
own
top of it.
series.
So,
Yeah.
and then there's all it is a lot. And then there's separate Primarch's novels. There's probably 75 plus Horus Heresy branded in one way or another stories out there, which is
Right.
insane, really,
Yeah.
really insane.
Huge amount of story, huge amount of lore, loads of characters, loads of events, and monumental events for the 40k background. I think so. This is my first time reading these, so obviously I've long been aware of them. I was around when they were coming out. I just wasn't reading these books or Black Library books really at the time. So I'm familiar. I've sort of absorbed a lot of the story by osmosis. Stuff you hear in store or you're talking about with friends and seeing online. So I know the story broadly speaking, but I've never read the story before. I think
Yeah.
you're in a very different place, right? You've enjoyed these stories at the time.
Yeah, well, just after they first started. So I've got the first five here, and these are my original copies. And these were 2007 editions. I'm not sure if
Right.
they're the very first print or not. I think they've all got the first five books in there. But when I read them, that's the first, those are the only five stories that were out at that point.
Right.
And this was at a period, this is probably why I like them so much. There's a bit of context just around my own personal bias with these. This is a period where I was just starting to think about getting back into gaming again. So I was probably reading these around 2009-ish, maybe. and and I've read 40k fiction before and not really enjoyed it. I tried it and found it to be a little bit trashy, bolter pornish kind of stuff. And then reading Horus Rising, I was like, wow, this is a proper book. This is written like a proper story. This is good. I'm hooked. And I mean proper book. I just mean something that you feel that could become a bestseller, which
Sure.
a lot of these did. So I really enjoyed it. And I read it on holiday in Greece, I think, and the state of it shows that it's been in the sun and maybe had some water from the pool side on it. And I was hooked. And I ended up reading three on that holiday. And when I came back from holiday, bought the other two that were available.
Right.
So part of why I enjoyed them, I think there's some real momentum of, my God, page turner and next book kind of thing.
Sure.
And the context for you is obviously very, very different
Yeah, very
coming to
different.
it from,
And I do, I don't want to say I regret not reading them at the time, but I can appreciate, or I can imagine how different it would feel to be reading these as they're coming out. And this
mm,
story being a story that it's being told in, real time, as it were. And you're looking forward to where the story goes next. You're sort of following it. You're speculating, all of that kind of stuff. Being in a place now of, okay, well, there's actually 60 of these books and they came out over a 20 odd year period. And that whole saga has been told and discussed and sort of picked over by an enormous community and like loads of different discussions and all sorts of stuff. So now it's looking back and sort of trying to get into that mindset of this is a story being told for the first time. So I
yeah,
think it is quite different. I think it would, and it was impossible for me to really get to that place. But it has
yes,
been really interesting reading them, knowing the broader outline of the story and where this thing goes as a cultural an event in the wargaming, in the Warhammer hobby. It is a major event, and over the last couple of years, as it was coming to its conclusion, talked
hmm
about an awful lot and all sorts of stuff. So it's it has been fascinating to go back. And I will say I enjoyed them. I enjoyed the story, and I can completely understand why they were like so successful and people did follow for that many books and want to be part of it.
Yeah.
I do have some thoughts though about certain aspects of it, which I guess we'll get into. That's the very nature of it. But we're probably going to jump around, I think, right? Because there's a
I
lot
think we
to
will.
talk about. Um, so I suppose probably the first place to really get into the story of it, I suppose we'll start with that first trilogy. So Horus Rising, False Gods, Galaxy in Flames. This essentially tells the story of Horus's fall to chaos, and some of the events that lead up to that, and then the actual moment it happens, and then the immediate aftermath of it. But a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it is told through the character of Garviel Loken, right?
Yeah.
Who is, quote unquote, a good guy space marine, right? And I will explain why
Yeah.
I put that in quotes later. Um, but there is, he is our sort of noble hero who's slowly comes to understand what is happening, and then faces into this massive betrayal that Horus, who has recently, within the last year or so, he has been appointed War Master of the Imperial forces on behalf of the Emperor. He's continuing the Great Crusade. The Emperor's gone home for mysterious reasons. Certain of his children, the Primarchs, the leaders of the Space Marines, feel a bit betrayed by this, a bit abandoned, and that then fosters into some of this betrayal where it's it is the worst kind of betrayal, right? So this opening trilogy, I mean, what are your sort of broad thoughts of it as a story?
Um, I think it does a number of things, and there's multiple contexts. One of those is when it was first written, it was to an audience that only knew heresy as those lines in Rogue Trader, and I think that's
Uh-huh.
one of the things that initially drew me in. Whereas when you've come to this, you know that there's a complete story, or almost a complete story there.
Yeah.
To those, those lines, I was there the day that the Emperor Horus slew the Emperor, and you think, oh my God, what's going to happen? Are we going to find out? How are we going to find out straight away what happened? Of course, there's none of that, but there was already a nostalgia thing. So there's a little bit of context there. They were playing on that straight away, but I think it does a number of things for me. One is that it shows legions of Astartes. It shows Space Marines in a completely different way than what we're used to as a Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine, which is more caricature, more action movie. And there's plenty of that in this, and even more so as the stories progress.
Mm.
But the other thing it does, it uses the non-Astartes characters to really get an understanding of the universe and the world, and how they see Astartes and how Astartes maybe see them and their place within that universe. And I think that's really powerful. I don't think that was done before these books.
Hmm.
And Dan Abnett is just a master at the human, isn't he?
Sure.
The human mind, just things from a human perspective in 40k, and really bringing us into the story so we can find something relatable, which you can't do if you read a story about Chaos Space Marines and it's from their point of view. I've always struggled with that, and that's just a personal thing. Whereas here, straight away, you've got remembrancers, you've got iterators, you've got people that are there as part of the Great Crusade, which is a really positive time as well.
Mm.
They start the books generally at the Great Crusade, and you see this optimism of bringing back the empire of man, the imperium of man, but then also all the questions about, are they doing the right thing?
Mm.
Are they actually are they space fascists? Well, of course they are, but they're also doing, and you got all these different layers, and it's just a lot more nuanced. It makes you think a lot more about what the imperium is,
Yeah.
and makes you immediately understand. Oh, this is how they got to 40k and what it is now. It was
Sure.
much better back then, but this is what they wasn't right then, but this is what they lost as
Mm.
well with this. And I just think there's all these complex layers that just made these books a little bit more enjoyable than some of the previous 40k stuff that I'd read.
Sure. Yeah, I can completely agree with that. I think you're totally right. It humanizes the Space Marines in such an interesting way. I think there are certain characters that works better for than others. But I think that it's a really nice way of moving them from just being the, they're just the poster boys who are just, they have no emotion, they know no fear, they have no character, which we know that can't really be the case based on how they act, like within the game, and the way that lieutenants and everyone, captains and all that sort of stuff, they look like individuals, they look like characters. But then when you see, even in, and perhaps more so in modern stuff, like the recent animations that were released, like the secret level animation or things of that nature, where they are just sort of silent killing machines who don't necessarily exhibit a lot of character. And I think that tends to be, or at least I've seen at times, that can be the sort of overriding impression of what Space Marines are like.
Yeah.
That makes it really hard to imagine, well, what do these guys do on the dropship on the way down to battle? What do they do in the gymnasiums or the canteens when they're on the ships before a battle is starting? Like, do they just sit in silence waiting for battle? That's all they do? Or do they actually talk amongst one another? Do they have conversations? Do they have thoughts, feelings? And I think that is a really nice thing that this book, or this series of books, really explores, is the fact that they are sort of post-human, but they're also human. There's a lot of humanity to them still, for good and for bad. And that obviously
Yes.
plays a major role. And then, your other point there as well, which I think is bang on, and it is a just incredible idea. The inclusion of the remembrancers, the iterators, the humans who are there to document the Great Crusade. It's such a fantastic idea. I don't know if it originated with Horus Rising. I'm not sure if it was in earlier lore or anything like that. Whoever came up with that, it is brilliant because it does so many things. Not only does it give you like a different perspective on all of the events that are about to unfold, but it gives you so much world building on what the Emperor was attempting, what the Imperium was trying to do and trying to be. It really touches on that kind of cultural aspect of like the Roman Empire or what have you, where they valued culture. The remembrances and iterators, they're there because they're the best photographers and the best poets and the best like playwrights and artists. They didn't just take a documentary film crew to record all of this stuff. They took a load of people, humans, who could use their art and their artistic talent to, quote unquote, document all of this amazing stuff in the most like artistic and brilliant and beautiful way, to tell the story to the rest of humanity about what the Space Marines are actually doing, what they're achieving for the Imperium. That's so interesting. It's such a difference to the 40k universe. 10,000 years later, arguably because of the events that occur here, there's no time for that. There's no time for art and culture. It's no longer about telling beautiful stories and writing poems about successes and victories. Every victory is like, it's just a momentary pause before you go into the next fight. By the time of 40k, here, they're able to have wonderful conversations and spend time thinking and feeling because they're not constantly fighting. So it's a really interesting way to sort of set the universe up in a. It's different to what we will come to know in 40k.
Yeah, 100%. But there's still that underlying. So all these iterators, well, I'll come to iterate. All these remembrances, these artists, they're there pursuing their art, but a lot of them have got a certain level of privilege. Some are almost aristocratic, and we meet singers and things later on in the story. And some are very much academics, but they're still from whatever the middle class is in the period. And then you have iterators, which are there to make sure that they're not swaying too far and having too much independent thought, because it is still controlled. The imperial truth is dictated as well. So it's not all sweetness and love and freedom and free press, because it's not. It's very controlled. We're not talking the same kind of freedoms that we have today. It feels much more I want to be careful about making comparisons to historical events, but it feels very much more like an expansive imperialistic state
Sure.
who has its own educated classes behind it and producing art and literature and press, but to match that narrative,
Absolutely,
so to
yeah.
think.
Yes, you're right. And
So
as much as
that's all there. It's still dark.
yeah,
They're still subjugate. They're still
yes,
finding new worlds and going, would you like to come back into the period? No, why not? You will,
sure.
and you will, or we'll destroy your planet and we'll steal your stuff. And if you've got any STCs, amazing. We'll have those. Thank you very very much. So
Yeah.
it's a real mesh of darkness and light
Oh,
there, but it's just that
absolutely. Yeah.
little bit of added light really makes a difference from the 40k universe, where it's all removed
Yeah.
because everything was taken, any hope has gone, and all we're left is with blind devotion
Hmm.
to a god who never wanted to be a god.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah,
Which
I
is
think
one of
that's
the key stories, isn't it?
it is.
It's a
Yeah, very
secular,
much so.
it's a
Or,
secular
yeah, and
imperium
there's some interesting
ish.
stuff in that to explore as well. But yes, just on that, I think you're totally right as well. Yes, it is this kind of point of light and this embracing of art and culture. It it like you say, it's propaganda, right? They are also
Yeah.
there to tell these stories of greatness so that people back home accept that this is why we have built this massive army. This is why we're out there subjugating peoples and taking war to the stars when we don't really need to be. And so all of that sort of stuff does have a dark underpinning as well, and it is very self-indulgent. And you're right. There's also these different social classes and all that sort of stuff that are at play as well. And yeah, certain sort of, although the imperial truth and the fact that you're not supposed to deify the emperor, there's also a lot of stuff that seems to be very accepted. That's
Hmm.
absolutely about that. Like even the people who ultimately betray the emperor, they've been primed to want a sort of great man to follow because that's
Hmm.
what they think they're doing with the emperor. They all like, and this is, I suppose, the sort of underlying rot within even the emperor's sort of Great Crusade and his version of the Imperium. All of the dominoes were already being set up for centuries because
Yeah.
of what he was doing and how he was doing it. All of these guys were primed to turn to chaos. They
Yeah.
didn't just turn to chaos in that moment with one conversation. There was a lot of stuff going on that would lead them to be in a place ready and vulnerable to chaos and ready to turn to chaos. So yeah, there's loads of other stuff happening here, like beyond the main action of the plot, which I think is lovely. And I think that's exactly what you're saying about it, sort of maybe almost elevating the 40k fiction in a way, because it is this
Mm.
epic saga. It is this huge story of major events, universe, galaxy like shaking events, and it's given the room to breathe. So even down to like, this is a trilogy of stories that kind of leads up to one main point, an important moment, that the sort of the initial serious betrayal of Horus. It takes the time. That could have all been one book, but actually
Mm.
it takes the time to do that over three, and then obviously goes beyond that and takes the time to say, well, what were these other guys doing in the run up to that? And you find out a lot of that sort of stuff as well. So I think that a lot of really good creative decisions were made going in to the way it was written.
Yes. Yeah. And I, I think for me, the patience about right in the first 3 to 5 books. What you haven't done, and what you probably won't end up doing, is reading beyond that.
Hmm.
And then what kind of happens is there's so much more to this story that the story almost doesn't progress. It kind of goes backwards and
Sure.
around in order to come forwards. And at one point, people were getting, I think the readers were getting a little bit annoyed. Might be in the mid 20s or something, book 20 odd. Come on, we need to stop. We want to know what's happening now. But the amount of layers that they built into this is almost like a real history building, in the same way
Yes.
that Tolkien could be described as building a real history with his linguistics, with all the languages and the prehistories he'd built through the Silmarillion, which made
Hmm.
Lord of the Rings so good and believable and so real feeling. because there was so much put into it. If you look back at the Heresy now and on all the different layers that have been added, it's so much of a richer story overall. But these first 5 books, I think, did a very good job, without necessarily trying to, but very good job of having a nice balance between
Yeah.
moving that story forward within a sort of a linear narrative arc, but then also adding all these little kind of, and this happened in the background, and you keep finding out little things that happen. That, oh, that's why this happened, and that's
Sure.
why this happened. And I think that's done really well. You feel. I don't know. I felt sorry for Horus quite a lot, but then you find out more and more that maybe he was planning things a little bit longer, and then
Didn't
and
feel sorry. Not in these 5 books. I did not feel sorry for
didn't you?
Horus at all. No way.
I think I felt sorry for him because I think you could see where he's been tricked and hoodwinked into believing you could see another path for him. Some people you could never see
Sure.
another path for. Like I don't know, I can't see Erebus having a different path ever. But without people like Erebus, I could see Horus potentially having a
Yeah, I
different
think
path.
that's certainly fair to say. But I think that, like I say, the rot was already there, and I think that's
Mhm.
true for a lot of the characters who do betray the Emperor and their fellow Space Marines. Because there's no way to explain all of this stuff just suddenly happening. Like
Yeah,
Horus is able to bring over a load of Primarchs to his side because they wanted to be there already, and most of their legions were already like corrupted, whether they knew it or not, and whether you would use those terms. It wasn't necessary. Like it was a type of chaos corruption. They just didn't know it. It was just,
yeah,
okay, they'd become a bit debauched or they'd become a bit too insular or arrogant or what have you. They'd taken themselves to places where they'd already strayed into the darkness. So they were
hmm
ready to turn to chaos. I think if there's, my biggest issue probably with those earlier books, so it's, and with Horus Rising and False Gods, I wouldn't have minded a bit more pre-turn Horus. Like I
yeah,
think that a decision may have been made to keep Horus off the table for some of it, so that his shadow is cast across Loken and the Mournival, but he's not present for an awful lot of stuff. You do get some scenes of him specifically talking to folks and sort of having dialogue with people. Like he talks to his own remembrancer at one point and has a few
yes,
conversations, and that was interesting. But I wouldn't have minded maybe being in his head a little bit more, just to
hmm
explain, like, because in these novels, you get hints of the Primarchs being frustrated and upset at the Emperor, but you don't really drill into it very much. Like, and this is one of the reasons I think the Space Marines were already quite rotten. Like they're so fragile. All of these guys are so emotionally fragile. It is unbelievable. Just constantly getting super upset at everybody. They fly into insane fury at the smallest provocation. Someone saying, "Okay, actually, I think we might have been betrayed." How dare you say we've been betrayed? I'm almost going to kill you for even making the accusation, even though you're right. Like because these guys they have no control over their own emotions, and that's the good guys as well, the
yeah,
supposed good guys. So I think the fact that the Primarchs are upset that the Emperor has abandoned them to go off and do his own mission. He's been leading you for 200 years on the Great Crusade. How much babysitting do you need, guys? Like this is unbelievable. Like they're so upset about it, and there's no like real exploration of it. Like it's all there, but there's no real
yeah.
exploration of like these guys are like just proper. Like they're losers. Some of these guys.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. There's a lot more, and
I'm
I
sure there
think
is. Yeah,
it's
it's
very,
60
it's
books, right?
very.
There's
I
loads
need
more
to
to
try and
go.
separate what I know
Sure.
of the bigger story from what's just in those there, because that is what a lot of the books are
Sure.
is going back and explaining and exploring a lot more. And what's great about the whole series, and particularly these books, nearly every character is flawed in some way. It's quite
Sure.
realistic, and these aren't all. They might be Greek god style or demigods in some ways because of their martial prowess, but in terms of their insecurities, then they are
Well, that is like Greek gods, though,
very,
right?
very. Well, yeah, I suppose you're
They
right.
do all have flaws.
You
They
have
are all arrogant or stupid or
true. I've
selfish or
just been
what have you.
reading the Trials of Apollo to Jacob at the moment. The person, and yeah, Apollo's pretty whiny.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but you see, you've got all these flaws, but then so have the so-called loyalists as well, and the emperor is absolutely flawed.
Sure.
And this is I wish you had the time to read some of the story arcs around the perpetuals
Mm,
and the emperor's origins as well, because they're excellent and they
right.
explain a lot of this a lot more. There's some really good ones, but we'll leave that for a
Sure.
conversation when we're
We'll
not
come back
recording.
and do that. Yeah.
But it's too many to plot that. But there's a really excellent sort of storyline with the perpetuals, and you learn more about the emperor
Sure.
and about his origins and things. And he's just really good. It's really fantastic. So yes, you're right. They are whiny. They are moany. There's far too many steroids going on there, isn't there?
Yeah.
They're super emotional.
Yeah.
They absolutely love their respective father, whoever that happens to be down the chain,
Sure.
and their
Yes.
father's father. The devotion is almost beyond understanding. I
Yeah.
think we all love our family members who would do anything for them, but this is almost that point to a crazy devotion level, isn't it? They worship for in a secular world, they're worshipping
Yes.
their primarch and their emperor, even though they're not supposed to be, and they don't even realize they're already deifying them.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it. They're so loyal to their own legions,
Mhm.
to a certain extent that they overreact to every single little
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, just completely flawed all the way through. And there's only a
Yeah.
few that have that kind of sort of more balanced cadence. And then that's where characters like Loken really stand out. They're used as a tool
Sure.
to explain what's going on.
Yeah,
They're
but
able
I
to
quite
step
like.
back and almost be more emotionally intelligent than even their gene fathers and their emperor
Sure.
at that point.
Yeah, which very much Loken is, but I do quite like. I mean, I think you're right. The religion for most of these guys is the utter faith and belief in your superior officer, basically, and and fellow officers and fellow troops, and that brotherhood is very important until it's not. When they start
Yeah,
killing each other. But the thing with Loken as well, I do like that because you're right. There is this alien nature to the Space Marines. As much as they are human and as much as they have all of these human emotions, they are also like transhuman and kind of way beyond it. Maybe they feel it more intensely because of that. So they do act and there's like inexplicable actions that some of these guys take. But you have things like, the when Horus is injured and the Marine and the Mournival and the guys bring Horus back onto the ship, and they're just like plowing through
yeah,
the remembrancers who are there, the humans who happen to be there, and they kill a load of them, and it's kind of like, oh well, it was necessary, like it was a necessary, like they were in the way, and we had to save Horus, and
yeah.
saving Horus was the most important thing in the universe, like that I think is really good, and like to
Hmm.
include that in the story because they're not good guys. Like even the good guys are not good guys. Look at how they like it. It's a necessary evil to kill a load of guys to save this one guy, and like because we love this guy so much more than we care about all of these other humans, these innocent humans who happen to be in the way. Like that's a really interesting place, and I was really glad that Loken is one of those one of the
Yeah.
Space Marines who does that because it just says yeah, even the best of the Space Marines, like don't get me wrong, I like him and I
Mm.
enjoyed his story. I think he's a great and he is a noble character for the most part, but he is also flawed and inhuman in that
Hmm.
way because he's a Space Marine. That's what they're all inhuman. They're all lacking in a certain something because of all this other stuff they've got going on.
Yeah, and that comes back a lot throughout the series, multiple times. That question of what is their place in the universe? Is it they're there as tools to advance and protect humanity, and there they are, seeing themselves and becoming superior to humanity and
Right.
treating them as a lower class citizen. You see that with all the Great Crusade stuff, and throughout all the books that there's this kind of the dominance of the legions of Astartes. They are superior, but then when they are questioned, and certain characters will self question, actually, why are we here?
Hmm.
We are just tools, and we are meant to be destroyed. We're supposed to achieve the goal of bringing humanity back together in one Imperium, but it's for the humans ultimately.
Sure.
That they are tools they're machines of death
Sure.
to conquer the galaxy, not for them to then go forth and populate the galaxy. It's for the humans, and you see that come back again and again, which is really, really interesting. And I think it almost makes them worse. It sends them into spiral with different characters in different ways, but into their own spiral of, well, who am I and why am I here?
Hmm.
Well, I have been, and some people like Locum would regret what they did and makes them think about that and maybe change their actions and do things to protect humans. And then you'll have others who are traitors who will kind of think, well, we've been used, this is how badly we've been treated because we've been created purely to conquer the galaxy for these lesser beings. So that you get the different responses about the same kind of main emotion, I suppose, around what are they to humans in relation, and where is their humanity?
Sure.
What is its begin and end, and all that. And you see that a lot throughout all of the books
Yeah.
if you
I
read
mean,
more of
that's
them.
interesting. Yeah, and I can imagine that's a really interesting arc to follow. And actually, going back to that idea of okay, so the Space Marines who turn up in Secret Level, the animation
Mm.
for that, for example, who are these kind of just silent killing machines? Is that because we're 10,000 years on from this, and actually they really have just taken on their place? Now they do. The Loyalist Marines fully understand their role as machines of death, so maybe they aren't like they're not having chats and jokes and like all of that sort of stuff like they were in 30k, because all of that's been drummed out of them either through surviving for 10,000 years fighting a war against your brothers, or because they're new marines who have been perfected, and whatever that might mean.
I suspect it's just down to writing style
Probably,
and that's
yeah,
all. I
probably,
know,
but
but in terms of as a thought
I mean
exercise,
that's yeah,
then
because that's
yes, it's great.
they wanted to show cool Space Marine action. They
Yeah,
didn't want to have
I
a load of
much
Space
prefer the
Marines
30k Space
eating
Marines. I find it.
cornbread, right?
Yeah. I mean, how much more interesting are Legions of Astartes
Hmm.
in Horus Heresy compared to a
Yeah,
an
I was
unemotional grunt in 40k. So I
sure.
wish they were more like that. But I'm with you. I know what you're saying, and maybe that has developed. And I think it probably the reality of the narrative as 40k lore would be that is different from chapter to chapter depending on their conditioning
Yeah, of
and the
course.
gene seed and all the other things that go into
Which
it.
is
But
great, and that's a good way of doing it, and give you canonize that
mm,
inconsistency because yeah, it can be down to what chapter they're from, where they are, when they are, all of that kind of stuff can account for all of that different sort of thing, and that's cool. I think that's totally fun. But yeah, this era is definitely one that's very interesting. Obviously, there's more to explore in the other books as well. One thing that I think is an interesting conversation point, maybe, is I've seen a lot of people over the years describe Horus Rising as like the perfect onboarding point to understand the 40k universe. If you want to get to know the setting, start with Horus Rising. It's a great story. It'll tell you everything you need to know. And I kind of think that that couldn't be further from the truth. Like I think that
yeah,
is utterly wrong. Like I don't think Horus Rising, sure, it tells you what Space Marines are and like, space battles, but I think the tone and the feel of this world by design is very different to the tone and feel and story of 40k. It's
Yeah,
set in the same universe,
absolutely.
but I don't think this is a good intro to 40k at all.
Yeah, I don't even. I mean, technically, it's the same universe, but in terms of a narrative events,
Mm.
10,000 years is a long time. I
Yeah,
yeah, I don't. I just for someone who's a completist who over explains and talks too long, I can understand why there is the need to. I love this thing so much. I love 30k. I love 40k, and I want you to experience what I experienced. Therefore, you must start from here. But the reality of it, then no, not at all. I don't think it
Mm.
works at all. I think you need to adjust to your audience a little bit as well. So if
Yeah,
someone's
and I think they
just a bit
knew that.
interested in modern 40k, you pick something
Sure,
modern, and then say, "Did you like that? Well, actually, do you want to learn about the prehistory?
right.
Now you've got some context of where we're at. Do you want to learn how different it was?" And then it can work. I think you don't need much of an
Yes,
introduction,
I think
but
with
just
some
to
more
say
context.
this
Yeah.
will tell you what 40k is. It definitely doesn't.
No, I don't think it does. And I also think the way that it was written was very much from that perspective of,
Hmm.
okay, 40k is the setting. We're going to go into the deep history. We're going to tell this, series of events that took place, and we're going to take our time to do so. But everything in how it is written is done from the sort of the perspective that where this is going
Yeah,
to go. Like they don't
yeah,
they're not hiding. I mean, there's obviously reveals and secrets and things come out, and that the way the structure plays out brings together that tension and surprises. But like the end of Horus Rising only works if you have any inkling of like the broader story and know what's about to happen on Davin. Like they literally, I did think it was a bit funny in the novel that it sort of goes to great pains, and I'm not. I think it's very well written as a book, but that final few lines is like, okay, we're going to have to go on this big mission. But first, Erebus wants us to stop off somewhere. Where does he want us to stop? And then they kind of look to the camera and go, Davin. And it's like, okay, well, that only works if we know the significance of Davin, if we know what is about to happen
yeah,
on Davin.
yeah,
And that's fine because we do, and that is the nature of it, of this story. But yeah, if this is your first time in, you're like, oh wow, Davin, what's that
what's
about?
that thing?
Yeah, exactly. So it's this really like important. There's like a real weight to the way it's delivered as the conclusion to the novel. If you don't have any idea about the story, then that's I would
Yeah,
imagine not a very satisfying ending to the first book. It's satisfying because you're like, oh, we're there. We're about to have the moment.
yeah, yeah, 100%. These books aren't written for new readers at all. I don't think you need to be necessarily a reader of 40k fiction, but
No,
I think they were written for players of Warhammer 40k or people that are familiar with Warhammer 40k over a number of editions and have read the core lore in those big tomes,
sure, yes.
be it Rogue Trader and see it developed, who knew the origins of a Space Marine, knew the origins of a Space Marine chapter,
Mhm.
knew that there were legions, knew that there was a Horus Heresy, and knew that background story. And it's full of nostalgia bits where you go, wow, this bit. And yeah, it's made for existing fans. And that's why it got me. It was like, oh,
It's
God,
very
yeah.
compelling. Yeah, it's very
Horus
compelling
Heresy, oh,
storytelling.
well, yeah. And so, and I think it was definitely aimed at that. So, yeah, yeah. If you've got someone that's got a lot of time and you want to introduce them to 40k and they're like, yeah, I've got a couple of years, I've got nothing to do. Maybe they had a back operation and they're going to be lying flat on their back for 6 months. They can't move. They're in traction. And
Yeah.
they got a lot of spare time and they're a quick reader. You go, well, just start from the beginning. And I wonder what the experience would be. I wonder how much reading it that way rather than knowing 40k and then seeing it as a prequel.
Mm.
I wonder what watching or reading it in order does to the way you understand the story. And it's something I can't ask my kids now
Sure.
about Star Wars, but they've experienced Star Wars in chronological order because of their ages. You kind of tend to start them with the Phantom Menace. And
Yeah,
I
I mean,
wonder, as
yeah.
an adult chatting to them, will I be able to wean out of them what their experience would have been, join them in that order rather than as me as an adult watching episode four and then going backwards. I will stop talking about Star Wars now, but I'm just using that
Well,
as an
yeah, it's
example. But
a fair point.
I
Yeah.
wonder whether you end up with the same experience. I don't think you
I
do.
don't think you do at all, and this is why I personally am a big fan of release order for anything. So,
Mm,
I'm reading very, very slowly, but I've just started some Terry Pratchett. And a lot of the suggestion is, oh, jump in with Mort or one of the better novels. Don't start at the start because actually it's slower going. But I tend to prefer following the release order because then you get to see how these things evolve and you get a little bit closer to the context in which they might have
yeah,
initially come out. And you see this with like movies, people talk about here's an MCU watch order. Watch all of the films from the MCU in their chronological order in the universe. So you're like,
yeah,
you'll be starting with, I don't know, I suppose Captain America and then Captain Marvel or something.
yeah,
And it's like, well, but that's that's a rubbish way to watch these stories. Like the chronological order, it removes all of the context in which those films were made and those stories were told. If
yeah.
you do it that way, you're denying yourself, I think, the sort of
Hmm.
the better, nicer way of
Yeah.
exploring it and seeing it.
Second or third time round, maybe because you
Oh,
get to
sure, yeah.
experience it in a different
Have
way. But
fun, yeah.
yes, I agree. I agree. I was trying to think of other series that I've read in that way. I think Sharp's an example because started at a certain point and then suddenly there must be like seven or eight prequel books and then there's
Sure.
others that he's now slotted in the middle within this timeline of the Peninsular War in Portugal and Spain.
Yeah.
But now I would read them in a chronological order. But it is weird. There are little bits you go, well, he didn't know that then.
Yeah, and
And
that will
but
always happen. But I think this is, I think
you're right though. I
generally
think
prequels, or not to get into a big debate on it, and I know this entire series is, it is a prequel. Prequels, I think, have a very tough job, and I think it's a job that doesn't often succeed. I think that a lot of the
mm,
times, because stuff is over-explained, and you find out too much information, and it doesn't line up, and then it becomes like an alternate version of the universe or what have you.
yeah,
It can be really as a form of storytelling. I think it can be easy to go off the rails for me at least. What I think we
yes,
see here with these five books is actually there's so much space. It's 10,000 years in the past. There's not a lot of written material, official canon for this period. So there's loads of space to go, okay, well, like who was there?
yeah.
What was happening? And what conversation did take place that led to this or that or the other? So there's
It
loads
does
of room
work.
to breathe here.
And there's nothing, and even with filling in all this prequel, it's still only a few years around
Right.
we still got a 10,000 year gap between
Sure.
the end of
Yes.
the
Yeah.
heresy and
Yeah.
so I mean they might start to fill that a little bit now.
Mm.
But yeah, you're right. I think he's worked here. This is an element where the prequels have worked, but partly because of that massive timeline difference. If anything, that's probably messed with that a little bit is actually Primarch's returning in 40k has
Right.
probably messed the balance of that 10,000 year gap because it
Sure.
feels like it's brought that a bit closer together. I've not
Yeah.
followed the modern lore with the returns of the Primarchs,
Yeah.
and
That's a really
it's
fair
fine.
point.
People enjoy it, but it definitely feels like it's brought those two
There's a
distinct
big
periods
difference,
together.
isn't there, when you've
Mm,
got, okay, because this is an era where the gods were walking about and they were doing stuff
mm,
and they were fighting each other. Most of them, if not all of them, are gone or dead. So, with that in 40k is like, well, the era of those like gods amongst us is long gone. Now it's just us, and it's rubbish. That's
yeah,
that's the 40k story. When you bring back all of the Primarchs, you then go, oh no, the gods are back and they're about and they're doing stuff again. So you change the tone a little bit. If
mm,
Gulliman is round like leading like a great new crusade, that's a bit more optimistic and hopeful now than it might have been if who knows where he is, or people are in stasis,
yeah,
people are injured, people are dead. The more that you bring back the Primarchs, the more you change that story, I think, and the tone of 40k. And you're right, it moves it much closer to being this style of storytelling that you had for the Horus Heresy, which is nice because it's so different to 40k.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I quite enjoyed the difference. Saying that, I mean, I'm not comparing because I've not read much of the, if really any, of the newer stuff.
Mm.
It might be great, but it definitely the clear distinction definitely seems to be eroding a little bit with every Primarch that they find rattling around in a cupboard somewhere and bring it back to life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it was, oh, it's just one we're bringing back, and suddenly they're all back. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
rumours of
Although
one more this year, but anyway, that's probably not where we want to take this conversation now.
there's some really cool stuff. I mean, I think all the Remembrancer stuff is really good. I think also
Yeah.
the stuff on the DS era is really good as well on the
Hmm.
Titan. So like
Yeah.
you build to this really neat like standoff on the actual like on the bridge of the Titan itself, which I think is really nice because that's humans at that point, and that's kind of a look into what's happening with it because we don't see any like Imperial Guard really, the Imperial Army. You see it through the Titan crew and a couple of characters, one of whom becomes completely bought into the God Emperor like cult
Yeah.
and is fully getting into it. Um, and there's a moment when the betrayal is happening where he could sort of save the day and like that this Titan could be on the side of the loyalists and the just he lacks the sort of merciless like trigger happy understandably because it's inconceivable the scale of the betrayal that's happening um and he's got his gun he could take out the guy he could seal the bridge and he could stop the sum of the betrayal but he doesn't pull the trigger and he gets killed himself.
Yeah.
And it's like a brutal moment of, okay, this isn't just the Primarchs, this isn't just Horus, it's happening everywhere. The betrayal goes right the way down. And
Yeah.
that's kind of a moment that's really powerful. And then obviously it's, another major ally in terms of a war machine for
Hmm.
Horus, just another domino falling and really painting the loyalists into a bad spot at
Yeah.
that point.
Yeah. Anywhere that there's a change in pace and interplay between how humans are dealing with this and how Astartes are dealing with it is always good. It's always powerful. And that was a good example. And there's loads more little stories like that.
Hmm.
I think the Remembrancers were some of my favourite characters in the series, and they continue. And it's really interesting to see the downfall of some of them, especially when we get to Fulgrim and you see some of them and their excesses
Wow.
and the madness, and then you see the ones from the original story go on to have an impact. Spoilers through the rest of the stories, and you kind of see that belief in the empire, the emperor, and the deification of the emperor is the beginnings of what you have in 40k, and that kind
Yeah.
of
Well,
and that it's nice to see the origins of that,
hmm.
the origins of that's one of the things I really like about these stories, about that kind of that from this secular world. You've got people worshipping without realizing they're worshipping just because they're over infatuation with their Primarch or with the Emperor, and then you've got all the warrior lodges and things going on in the background. So the
Sure.
Marines and normal crew members slowly being taken in and being weakened towards chaos in one sense, and then you've got almost the counterplay to that, other people starting to worship in secret the emperor because
Sure.
they turn to religion. Oh, I don't want to make any comments about religion that upsets anyone, but they're turning to religion for a comfort, um,
Yes. Yeah.
and I think that's really interesting as well. And you
That's
see how that
great. Yeah.
comfort then kind of develops to something that people start to believe, including Astartes
Hmm.
on the loyalist side, and you can see that how that is the formation of what we have in 40k with
Hmm.
worshipping a corpse emperor on a psychic throne, and
Yeah. But yeah,
And that's the irony that that's the opposite of what he wanted.
well,
Is that and that's
sure.
it really, isn't it? The big irony is the last thing he
Yeah,
wanted was to
although
be stuck
I'm
on a
intrigued by
throne
this.
being worshipped by people. Or
Yeah, I mean,
maybe he
I'm
did.
intrigued by this because so, well, just before getting into that point, I was going to say about like Ignatius Carcassy. So he's one of the poets, one of the
Mm,
remembrancers. He's a really good character
brilliant
who is
character.
standing up to the like. He doesn't want to be a propagandist. He doesn't want to sort of
Yeah,
fall in line, and he kind of tries to fight back against that a little bit and gets punished for it, and then fully sort of starts leaning towards okay, he's dissenting against a lot of what he's seeing, and gets killed.
yeah,
And that's
yeah,
one of the steps that sort of Loken's journey is influenced by. And so he sort of he like I think that's really interesting because you see Loken how the impact of a human's death in that case because he knew him and because of what he was saying and because Loken had taken responsibility for him that
hmm
affects Loken a lot more and kind of influences some more of his actions even though
yeah,
he'd in a broader sense taken responsibility for all humanity because he's
yeah,
Astartes um and that not having quite the same impact as an abstract concept I suppose but
yeah.
the
I think that's just it. I think that's a humanity thing, and I think it's a way of showing the humanity in the Astartes in the
sure
same way we all do at times. And again, trying to be careful not to put too much real life context in, but we can all maybe walk past someone on the street and we don't give them money, and we shut off that connection to their plight. But if it's someone close to you, your emotions towards them are much
yeah that's
stronger,
right
and I think you're seeing that there with the way he acted to the unknown remembrances when he thought his father was dying, his Primarch was dying, versus someone that he was attached to and had a connection with. And then you actually see a little bit of almost an emotion there, a bit
yeah
of grief, I suppose. And it's kind of elements of real humanity coming through in the Astartes from time to time, and you see that
yeah
with Loken more than many of the others. Garrow a bit as well. You see a few characters. Acton Cruz a little bit at times. You just see it's the good guys, isn't it? You see it more. They use,
yeah
and that's just normal storytelling.
Yeah, and
They
that
have to tell it that
contributes.
way, but
It's quite nice because that moves a lot of the pieces around, and it is one of the reasons that Loken then sort of takes more responsibility for the remembrancers who do survive, and it's
mm,
because he feels a responsibility. He then passes that on to Cruz, who then helps them escape. I mean, that whole sequence is amazing when Horus brings all the remembrancers to watch the bombardment, and they realize the horror of what's taking place,
yeah,
and then they are massacred. And it is just
yes,
it's incredibly cruel, and it just shows how far Horus has fallen. But then there's also quite a nice sequence of events to have our remembrances, our protagonist remembrances, survive that sort of event and get
yes,
off of the ship. But the thing about the Emperor and the God Emperor element of it, and this may be explained in the later novels, but there's things like Euphrates Tequila becoming a sort of a saint, right? And
hmm
and and being saved by some sort of deity, some kind of like divine intervention that prevents a summoned demon from killing her. Um, there's a few things like that that would seem to be the work of a divine entity who is acting on behalf of the emperor.
hmm
And if it's not the emperor, who or what is it?
yeah. I think throughout the whole series, that's left as a discussion point you can
Right.
interpret in different ways. And I'm not sure. I think it's left vague enough sometimes that it's nice. It's almost like real discussions around religions where I'm not quite sure what's gone on then. It could well be that his psychic ability that he's
Mhm.
able to do those things, and it's not divinity. It's depends whether you think his psychic ability has a scientific
Sure.
background or whether it has a spiritual kind of background to it as well. There's so many ways you could explore what that is. The same with the Chaos Gods. Are they gods? or are they just another life form that exists in a way that our human understanding can't comprehend? Uh, and you could, yeah, I think that's discussed a little bit throughout the stories as they expand. And when you learn more about the Emperor and his origins, and the fact that he's a perpetual, and there are other perpetuals that you meet that have known him
Mm.
for a very long time, not millennia, millennia, right from. There's lots of correlation with real Earth history as well. Little moments. Sometimes names change slightly, but you're left kind of, oh, that would have been this and then. It's really interesting. So I think it probably exists a way to read certain books that have that storyline in. I can think of a few, and there might be something you enjoy
Mm.
exploring. I think more than some of the others, because I think you'd enjoy. You might just be able to read about it. To be honest with you, there might be enough wikis that give you the information
Sure. Yeah.
you find interesting, but it's really interesting,
I
and
mean,
it
I
adds
quite
real
liked
depth.
the Ian Watson. I think it was an Ian Watson suggestion that maybe the Emperor, the God Emperor, the corpse Emperor of later era, 40K, uh, it could just be the souls of the psykers who are sacrificed, like
Yeah,
collectively. So if 1,000 psykers are sacrificed every day, their sacrifice and their minds just before they like ebb out of existence collectively has the psychic force to be the emperor, as it were, to be
yeah,
this kind of deity. And then I quite like tying that to if that were the case, or it was just the emperor, the god emperor, like reaching back through time, purposefully or otherwise, to intervene before the emperor even knew anything was going wrong, like because if time and space would be meaningless to a god or a god entity, so being able to go back to when that intervention was required, even though it will be many years or millennia or however long before the entity would actually be taking that action, if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
I think I'm adding a lot to it. I don't think that's necessarily in the
potentially,
text,
yeah.
but
I think that when if you read more that Ark was talking about, and then definitely the End of the Death volumes,
right.
you learn more there about the Emperor's power, and how powerful he is in relation to other powers within the universe.
Hmm.
And there are stronger powers there, and what he gives into, and what he could take, and what he turns away, without spoiling the end of because I get those people that probably won't have still have read the end and might want to. So, but
Sure.
there's a lot of interplay around how much power he could have, but what that might mean if he took that power, and what he would become.
Hmm.
And so I don't know is the honest answer, and I think it's debatable, and people will interpret it in different ways, and
Probably is
maybe
the
the
best.
authors have,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's quite nice. I quite like it like that. I quite like that. And maybe there is a definitive thing that I've not picked up on, and maybe Dan Abnett is probably the main driving author around a lot of the Emperor's story. Has decided it's a certain way or another, or felt that he's given a definitive answer, but I
Hmm.
think it's left a little bit vague in places. But you do find out a lot
Sure.
more of your questions in lots of later books. Unfortunately, it's not one or two.
Sure. Yeah.
You'd have to read quite a few. But
I mean, it's
the early stages of this, I think you can almost take it as we don't really know the Emperor's thoughts. He's not genuinely not shared his plan. That's one of the biggest problems. That's one of the problems with Magnus, and Magnus ending up
well,
on the wrong. The whole Magnus did
sure.
nothing wrong things because he thought he was doing the right thing, but actually
But then is
broke
there not
something
also an
very important.
interpretation
Well,
here? Like, could there be an
yeah, potentially.
interpretation that the emperor that this is all part of a plan? Like,
Hmm?
actually, Horus's betrayal, because there's so much stuff. And again, I haven't read the next 55 novels, but there's so much stuff that is like so clearly foolish for the emperor to have done. And
Yeah,
like, he clearly missing all the signs about Horus's instability, and clear inappropriateness for the level of responsibility he was given. Like, the reasons to have made choices like that, to have made him War Master, and to have moved, like he moves a load of the pieces around on the board, and he like calls back Rogel Dawn to be building
Mm.
fortresses and whatever later on. So all of this stuff, like almost it implies that he must have known that there was going to have to be this event, there was going to have to be this heresy, and the next 10,000 years of grim darkness and war would be necessary in order for some greater goal to have been achieved.
Yeah, potentially, but also I think what you find out is the Emperor is deeply flawed, as
Sure.
well as being the most incredible being that's ever come from the Earth as well. And I think that both of those things can be true. So maybe he would have had the power of foresight in some ways, but there are other powers that are potentially stronger and
Hmm.
more powerful and more all-knowing that are playing with things as well. So
Sure.
the chaos powers and gods have got an awful lot of
Yeah.
agency,
I just
and
I think
so I think their influence is the missing factor there from what you were
right.
thinking about, is that they're doing an awful lot at the same time,
Yeah,
where
that's true actually. Yeah.
he's trying to exist in a world where they don't have power and they can't intervene. Um, we're talking about designing a way. They have to travel using the warp,
Hmm.
and I think
Well, I do
we're
quite
moving well
like
away. We're moving
yeah.
a long way away from these books, and I
Of
think
course, yeah, but
that's
I do quite
we
like
were doing
the
a review of the whole Horus Heresy. But when you read
sure,
about the war in the web way and all that, there's so
sure.
much stuff going into that. I think we'll answer those questions a lot more. But he's definitely debatable, and we don't have a one definitive. Yes, the Emperor was this or that, and
I
maybe they
suppose
should
my
have known
point
more.
is driven by and not to harp on too much about it, but like the Primarchs are so flawed. They
Mm.
are, everybody talks about them. Obviously, all of their Marine followers, their cult of Astartes. The way they are talked about is as being these perfect individuals, but then the way they act is so human and
Mm.
flawed and obviously flawed. And like I say, they barely keep in control of any of their emotions at any point in time. Incredible violence, ready to get into fights for like just for nothing, and some of them not even being very smart at all. Just like making ridiculous suggestions and terrible judgment and all sorts of stuff, driven so much by emotion. Everything Ferrus Manus does is just, what are you doing, mate? Like you are, oh, I'm sorry to say, deserve what happens to you because you are ridiculous. Like, and there's loads of that. These guys are really super
Yeah.
flawed. And the Emperor's like, this is my team. That these are going to get it done. And so
I
why
don't
have
think
you
he
done that?
is. I don't think he is. I think they are tools, and he probably does mean to use them at that. Obviously, the plan was never for them to be jettisoned all around the universe and grow up
Sure.
on different planets and things. So
But even
yes,
that though,
they
right?
are.
Even
Some of
that,
them are
but that
comically bad, but I suppose that's kind of just written into the
But
story as part
it
of it,
absolutely
isn't it? It's
is,
kind of
right? But if you've created these genetic super soldiers and these aspects of yourself to rule your armies, and then you lose them, and for decades, and they're all growing up in completely different places, and then you find them again conveniently, is it a good idea to be like, and I'm going to give you control of my legions, like just instantly, like just by virtue of being my children, I'm going to put you in absolute control without any real like guardrails or anything of just tens of thousands of super soldier warriors. Like it's so absurd. And I know this is obviously the limitations of the story, and this is building.
quite clearly not, because there was some terrible decision making going on there in hindsight. But I guess we see it a lot in the modern world. People are picked very often because they get stuff done,
I suppose
and
that's
that
true,
getting
actually. Yeah.
stuff done
Yeah.
is it might look like a really really good thing in the short term.
Sure.
If you want to win an next election or something, but 10, 15, 20 years down the line, that getting stuff done doesn't always turn out to be good, and that's probably what we're seeing
That's actually,
seeing
yeah,
there.
a very good point. I'm ignoring but in order to create the perfect novel or story, I'm ignoring reality where this kind of terrible decision making is happening all the time. So yeah,
Time.
that's probably fair enough actually. But yeah, the the the, the later, so you move into, because I was going to say actually about knowing where the sum of the story goes. So in Galaxy in Flames, obviously you get the actual, like, the battle on Istavan 3. This is
Hmm.
where the betrayal takes place, and the loyalist Marines are kind of they're battered back into a siege. The virus bombs have been deployed. There's some really cool stuff with like Soltarvitz getting onto the
Mm.
planet and stepping in to try and save the day. Like those are kind of like noble moments that are really, really
Yes.
good.
Yeah.
Um, Loads of the Marines survive the virus bombs that Horus has planned to deploy. And then you see on the flight to the Eisenstein, you see some of that playing out from the other perspective, which is really cool. But then you have this really great sort of series of battles, series of tense moments, conversations, all of this sort of noble sacrifice that brings you up to this point where Loken dies, and it ends Galaxy in Flames in this incredible place where the betrayal is sort of confirmed. It's blooded now.
Yeah.
And this is the fall of Horus. This is the fall of the vision, the Emperor's vision, and the noble Space Marines. You know, the nobility and purity of the Space Marines, the Astartes, in the form of Loken, is buried under rubble and dies. Right, that dream dies with Loken.
Yeah.
I think that that's an incredible end to Galaxy in Flames, and I'm glad that that's the end of Loken's story and we never see him again. Because I think that that's a really powerful moment, and I think the symbolism of it would be undermined if he hadn't died in that sequence. So I'm glad we're only covering the first five novels because I think that's really powerful stuff.
Yeah, he's my favorite character, so I personally obviously happy. For those of you who didn't realize Jordan was being sarcastic,
I'm
I'm happy he came back. He's disappeared for quite a while, to be
sure.
honest with you. But we can brush that off. I mean, he technically passed that baton, that relay baton, on
Yeah, which
to
I really
Garrett,
like, though. That's what's really
which
cool
yeah.
about it. Yeah, and like I said, I am being facetious. I haven't read, so Loken does actually survive. I know he changes and
Mhm.
he sort of comes back, and there's a lot of Phoenix from the Flames stuff. It could be written incredibly well. I just think that within the context of at least these five books, his death, I think, is really important. It's the midpoint of this five-part element of the saga, and it is the moment of darkness. It is everything's gone wrong. The good the good guys have died, and what he represented, like the possibility. You mentioned Horus could have gone another way. He
Mm.
represents that for the Sons of Horus, right? He represents
Yeah.
that for that legion. They didn't go the other way. They went to the darkness, and that is why Loken has died. And then the passing of the baton that you mentioned, so getting the ensuring that the message gets to the Eisenstein and that Garrow and co can take that onwards to the Emperor. That's really
Yeah.
cool. That's just a great bit of storytelling. That's so compelling to be like. I think it's shocking. It's season one of Game of Thrones with
Yeah.
the most famous person in the show, Sean Bean, not surviving, past episode 7 or whatever it was. That's incredibly shocking. So our character, who we all really like him. He's ace. He is the best of the Space Marines. Sure, he has flaws, but he's also aware of them to an extent, and that makes him even
Yeah.
more endearing as a character. So he's great, and we absolutely feel it, and I felt it when he died. It's really sad, but it's also really important that he died. I
that he
think.
died. Yeah.
Yeah.
You maybe get the best of both worlds. I also think, I mean, this is going into a different debate. I think that some of the stuff he does later on, you could have had Garrow doing it because Garrow kind of disappears off a little bit as well in
Right.
some of the later books. So you could have brought him, but that would be a huge debate that
I like Garrow
doesn't
as
fit in
well.
within the remit of these. Yeah, and then Garrow's got his own story and the origins of what he's creating for the impact with 40k as well. There's a lot of that. There's hundreds of origin stories for different legions, chapters, departments, beliefs, characters. There's so much that happens amongst these 70 odd books,
Yeah.
and you see quite a few of those have their initial kind of seeds planted in these five, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And I liked Flight to the Eisenstein, I thought was a really fun novel. If I had, so I listened to all five on as audiobooks. So,
Hmm.
the first three had the same narrator, and then that changed going into book four. So I think it was Toby Longworth did the first three,
Yeah,
really, really good, and but that consistency is fantastic because that then keeps the sort of you feel like you're in the same story, it's the same saga. So it was quite a
yeah, he's
surprise to
excellent.
go to I think it's Jonathan Keeble who does
Hmm.
Flight to the Eisenstein. Absolutely fantastic on Gotrek and Felix. Good on Flight to the Eisenstein. If I have an issue that maybe colored my perception of the book was that I think he plays the Death Guard, like the traitor Death Guard and Mortarion and guys like that, as like very evil sounding.
A bit too comical. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean it's just even before they have fully revealed themselves, like the way they talk and the way they breathe is proper serial killer energy. And these are like, even when they're the good guys and like Garrow's like, "Oh, you're my favorite. I love you, boss. You're really good." And like Mortarion's like, "Let's drink some poison." Like it's just a bit like, okay. I mean, come on, Garrow. You can see this guy's not all above board, right?
yeah.
He's a bit creepy.
I mean, I don't know the history of Jonathan Keeble in terms of reading for Black Library
Mm,
things, and I wonder whether that being the first Horus Heresy novel, maybe he'd done plenty of 40k ones or a few.
mm,
And there is a different tone to these books. They're the most serious
sure.
Warhammer fiction books out of anything. There's nothing this serious. Even End Times tries to be serious and it just doesn't nail it at all. You've still got that funny Warhammer-esque feel to it. Whereas there's just no humor at all, really, is there? If there is, it's a bit of black humor. Whereas 40k still has a humorous elements to it, and
Mm.
your evil characters are also big and large and can be quite cartoonish in their evilness. And I wonder whether that was just a slight sort of a misplay because I'm trying to remember because he read so many later ones as well.
Right.
I don't think that continued. I think the tone changes a little
Yeah, and
bit.
I
So I
don't
just
want to
wonder
come
whether
down
that was,
too
yeah, no, I
hard.
just wonder whether that was here's the book, you're reading it, and he's kind of read it in a similar way that he's read other things.
I think you get it a bit with
And that
Fulgrim
came
as well,
across.
though, because
Yeah,
with Fulgrim, again, like you get real like I don't want to say caricatured, but like the Emperor's Children and Fulgrim himself, like it's just maybe a bit on the nose for like fancy dandy kind of like obviously going to be a bit toffee and like it's just like there's a certain energy to the characterization in the reading that I think is just maybe a bit too strong. Maybe put a bit
okay.
too much seasoning into it because it didn't need like it makes it feel less natural and like an organic betrayal if they're just already evil and like already
Yeah,
these caricatures before they even fall to chaos.
yeah, because it's toned down a little bit when we meet the Emperor's Children earlier on in the first three books, and we see the campaign on murder.
Yes. Yeah.
And technically, a lot of the events in Fulgrim are then going back, aren't
Sure.
they? So they should be at a similar kind of level. So I think I know where you're coming from. It doesn't spoil it for me,
No, it doesn't
but
ruin it or anything like
I
that, but
think
it
I know
is
what I think I and I don't. But also, I read these multiple times before I listened to them. The
sure.
audiobooks. Now I listen to more audiobooks than I read physical books. But at the time, I'd read these, so my voice for them is probably more consistent because my brain's
Sure.
just auto tuning it to what I know. Um, and maybe also because I know what happens, and because so much happens in Fulgrim. We see the most horrific fall in a different kind of way
Mm.
because it's gruesome, because it's visceral, it's sexual in some ways, and just grim in others. In every way you can imagine, whether that's body horror, whether that's blood and gore or feces. You've got all the elements there. If you can imagine it, it's kind of there. It's if you think, you can think the thing, the film, can't you? That is, and many other things. But yeah, it's maybe because of that I accept it as well, because they definitely, as a legion, are messed up in a way that some of the others aren't, and
Mm.
that's the Slaneshi thing. But you see Slanesh in a different way, don't you? Your 40k Slanesh is it's a little bit more hidden. We're only flashing one boob in 40k, aren't we, all the time? Whereas you see it, they've made it more grim dark, haven't they? And that's what it feels more realistic.
Yeah,
It feels
there's
like
a lot more like body
it's
horror
Slanish for
elements to it.
adults,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think because of that, them being a little bit evil, kind of, I don't know, just works for me. I
Yeah,
think
maybe it's just a bit too theatrical, or
mm,
more theatrical than I necessarily was looking for.
yeah,
Yeah, not it doesn't ruin any of the storytelling or anything like that. I just think I wouldn't
yeah,
have mind dialing those characters down a little bit.
yeah,
But yeah, I think the Fulgrim story is an interesting one. There is a lot in it, and it was surprising the length of it for me. Um,
hmm,
I think it's really interestingly structured, and like you say, you go back and you sort of see things that lead up to the events on a couple of things we'd seen previously, like you say, murder and Istvan 3, and then we get Istvan 5 as well,
5, yeah,
the drop site massacre, which obviously is a super important moment. I was kind of surprised how short that sequence was at the end of the novel, though.
yeah,
Like I probably wouldn't have minded reconstituting it a little bit and having less time getting to it and more time at it. Because once you get to the drop site massacre, it happens very quickly, and maybe that's part of the point. Um, but
mm,
it didn't. I'm not sure it had quite as much like emotional weight as maybe I wanted
yeah,
because, and maybe this is just, and this probably is just me, because the emotional element of that sequence is told through Ferrus Manus and Fulgrim. And
yeah,
Fulgrim, I wasn't too sure that I was as invested as I think I was supposed to be in the story of those two. I don't know
yeah,
that it 100% nailed that for me. Um, and again, some of that just comes down to like, I mean, some of it comes down to we're told that these were great brothers and great friends, but the way that they interact, even earlier on in the novel when they're still great friends and brothers, wasn't that like it didn't have that feel to it because they're very
yeah,
different, and it didn't necessarily feel like they would like spending time together at all. And I know Fulgrim's already on his journey to darkness, so maybe you could sort of explain it in that way. Um,
maybe that's what it is.
but yeah, by
Um,
the time you get to the sort of big moment, and there's some really cool ideas in there, some really well written stuff. Like I love the idea that they forged weapons for each other, but by
hmm,
the time they have their final duel, they've got the weapon that they forged. They've taken them back from each other because the brotherhood is broken, it's shattered. So
yeah,
so they take their own weapons back and then use those weapons, those gifts, to try and kill each other, which I think is really it's quite poignant and quite cool. And then there's also some interesting stuff with Fulgrim himself, whether or not it's Fulgrim himself who is actually doing the
Yes.
fall and the betraying. Um, I mean, what's your sort of feeling on that? Because you obviously you find out that it's ultimately a demon that
Hmm.
is residing within a cursed blade that
Yeah.
Fulgrim has ended up picking up, and he's fully replaced by the end of it. He has a conversation with Horus where he's like, yeah, Fulgrim's in a box. I'm
Yeah.
I'm taking over, but don't worry, I'm all for you. So you kind of get, another betrayal from Horus, betraying a guy who's come alongside him for the
Yeah.
betrayal. So that's really interesting. But how do you feel about it?
Well, that's one of the bits I really like, and I like the slow fall we've got, that slow weakening of the real Fulgrim and the strength of the demon, and you see that interplay along with again the remembrances that are on that ship and the artists from them, whether they're singing or whether they're painting or sculpting, and you see their sort of fall. It's Serena D'Angelis, and you see her kind of go from this perfect, which is perfection with the whole Legion thing. It's very cleverly done. Artist with pristine studio, and you see that fall, and it's almost like that fall is like the journey of someone with mental health issues, addiction problems, and you see all that kind of played through, but as falling to chaos. And I think that is really powerful and really good. And then you see at the same time that mirrors Fulgrim's own fall. And the connection becomes the painting that
Mm.
she's working on for him as well, of a portrait of him, and what that portrait becomes. So I think that's why it's I love the book,
Mm.
that part of it, and that's why I don't mind that taking a little bit longer. For me, biggest fan five element of it, um, it's a military campaign, and I prefer the story building up to that. And I think the danger of making this fan five longer is we've seen a betrayal at his fan three, so that's the
Mm.
shock moment, the first killing of loyalist. This next bit is we know it's coming. It's the trap, and it kind of that's the end of the first real big sort of season. It's like the season ender, isn't it?
Oh.
Before we move on to the later heresy. That's why I made you read all five of these for this discussion. So rather than just, we can't just stop on the first three because you really need this fan five as well, because this kind of sets up the rest of the heresy. This is the end of season one. And I don't mind that this fan five being a bit shorter because it feels like it's the inevitable capping the end of that first story arc, that main story arc.
Sure. Yeah, you know what?
And
Actually,
I
you've
do like that
convinced
slow.
me to. I think that's a fair shout. I think, yeah, maybe I'm looking for something that isn't necessary there. Yeah, I think there are there are some really interesting moments. Like I love that picture because she has just used all different, all
Bodily
different
fluids, basically.
natural, yeah, basically.
Well, she's
And
basically
it's
murdering people and putting them in a big pot and then using them to,
Yeah, it's really
it's
gross. And
amazing.
yeah, it very much works within this context, and it because it is gross and it is it's evil and it's fully she's fully gone.
Mm,
And I also like that whenever anybody sees it, it both looks horrific and they know it, and it also stinks, and that like it's
yeah.
just horrible in every conceivable way. But like Fulgrim's on board. He's like it's like that's quite a nice. I mean, it's kind of this almost Dorian Gray esque.
Yes, I've got
The
Dorian Gray in my notes. It's
sure,
just brilliant, isn't it?
yeah, because it is as the corruption of Fulgrim and this perfect, well, not human, but the closest thing a perfect Astartes could be to a perfect human, or well Primarch even, becoming completely corrupted. Like
Mm,
it is the outside corruption to match the internal corruption. And I know there's obviously some stuff we see with like how Fulgrim presents himself as he
yeah.
is overtaken by this creature that is residing within him, that's possessing him. Um, but yeah, there is some really cool stuff in there, And I'm glad. I think you were right to say, you know what, this is the 5-part opener, and it will lay that foundation. I think it was really good to read it or to experience that story, and I'm pleased I did. Do I think I will continue with the Horus Heresy after this point? Possible, but I kind of feel like I would need a big break. Like I feel that these
Mm.
5 were really good and there's some really good stuff in it. There's things that I would love to have, seen a little bit more of or slightly different, but that's always the case. But
Yeah,
overall, it's a really good story. It's really compelling. Um,
yeah.
but I'm almost like, okay, cool. That's the Horus Heresy. I don't think I need to know the rest.
There's a lot you can skip, and I've had this conversation with different heresy fans, and some find it very hard to let any of it go because it's
Right.
like, but this bit's really cool, and this bit, and this bit's, and for me, it's just too big now to get someone to come along
Hmm.
and read it all. I think you can miss an awful lot. You can almost jump now. You'd miss a lot of references, but you can almost jump to the siege stuff in many ways. And I know people will be like, "No, you can't," but you can. There's so much in there that there's a few books that are really not very good at all, as you can imagine. With that many books, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
There are a few that are great, but in terms of their overall story impact, you can miss them out as well. They're not as important to the overall understanding of 40k. I mean, there's so much set up in this. There's even the Fabius Bile and the body modification to become more pervert. All of this kind of stuff
Sure.
that is part of the ethos of the Emperor's Children, and we in 40k was it's kind of set up in his book. As again, that's probably why it's a bit longer with all of that because these things need to be told. But interrupting myself, there are a few books that you maybe want to sort of find out a little bit more because it tells you a little bit more about the narrative journey of the major players, the major legions later
Hmm.
on, and there are bits you won't get to the callbacks. But I also don't think it doesn't matter. You could just skip to the siege books if you wanted to and go
Sure.
right. This is the beginning. Yeah, there are a lot happens in between, but let's get to the end, and it would kind of work. You can do it.
I mean, I can believe
There's
it.
still a
Yeah.
lot in the siege to get through. So there's what is there, 7 books, and
Right.
and then the final trilogy,
Sure. Yeah.
which is one story. It's one book essentially broken into 3 parts. It's Dan Abnett's Lord of the Rings in terms of that sort of size of a one single story, but it's split into 3 books. But yeah, so there'd be things like, oh yeah, that's good. You should read this as well. But
I mean,
you could
yeah.
read these 5 and then skip to the end if you wanted to.
This is where it feels a little bit like this is where the missing out element does come in because I do think if I'd read these as they were coming out, I think I would
Mm,
have been much more in the mindset of wanting to know what happens next. And like you
yeah,
say, it's so much easier to commit to, oh, well, that next book's not out for another couple of months. And then when it comes out, I'll read it, and there'll be months until the next one comes
yeah,
out.
which
That's
is
very
exactly what I did,
different.
and it works.
Right, I can believe that for sure. When you're sat down and there's a shelf with 60 books on it, it's like, okay, that now feels like a job as opposed to a chore, as
Yeah.
opposed to a chore, as opposed to a sort of joyful thing to be, like a hobby. And it shouldn't necessarily. It just is the way the brain works, or at least my brain
And there
works,
will be books that you will feel like a chore when you're reading them as well. And
Right.
some you'll think, well, this is okay, but
Right.
what's this got to do with it? And that was part of the problem from the next book onwards, really.
Right.
Because you go to, oh, right, we've got to start telling a lot of back histories of all of the legions now. And we're going to take 2 or 3 books to tell this story. And I think the very next book is one of the angels books, Descent of Angels.
Right.
So you get bits of Great Crusade, Dark Angels, and then back on their own planet, and you're like, this is good, but whoa, where's all the momentum we just built up with these
Sure.
first 5 stories? And now it doesn't matter because it's this wonderful, rich backstory. But at the time, a lot of people didn't like that book. So I
Mm.
say, well, the momentum's gone a little bit. And I think that was a problem at times. So you could definitely take quite a few out and get a slimmed down version. And like I said, you could definitely skip right to the end if you really want to, but you will
It
miss some
is
cool stuff.
an interesting point, actually, that like, most of the big famous chapters are just not in these 5 books, right?
Yeah.
You're not seeing the Blood Angels and the Ultramarines and the Dark
You
Angels,
don't see
Space Wolves.
I mean, the Ultramarines are kind of written into the heresy anyway. They don't arrive at the end for the siege. They arrive
Right.
afterwards. They do have their own real ding dong with the word bearers, and that's a brilliant set sort of story arc, and those books are worth reading. But again, it's one of those bits that you can skip it and just
Right.
read a wiki on it to know what goes on in terms of context. But if you I want to read the Horus Heresy, the origins, the siege, those
Mm,
big bits that you remember from when you read about it in first and second and third edition 40k, then you can do that and miss some of those things out, because as much as it was really important
sure.
to the overall context, they're not super important to them, a
Yeah.
more streamlined version of the Horus Heresy narrative. So
Well,
you can
and
definitely cut bits out. I
you
think
know,
it's more important in many ways to read the whole Perpetuals narrative
right.
and John Grammaticus and things. I think you'd love those as well. I think they're more important to the final story than learning about what certain legions that weren't actually there at the siege in the end
Mm.
were up to.
I think it's remarkable that these five books telling such a significant tale, they are really consistently good. So ultimately, I think for me, it does peak in the middle. I think Galaxy and Flames, like Horus Rising, is amazing, does incredible work to set things up, but that momentum carries on and really does
Yeah.
peak with Galaxy and Flames. I think Flight to the Eisenstein and Fulgrim are really good books, and it's incredible that consistency was like maintained for five
Hmm.
books in a series like this, with different authors involved. Like absolutely amazing. I couldn't imagine them doing 60 books at this kind of level because
No.
these are all really
There are
good
books at
books.
this level that are very, very good, but
Right.
the context of them makes it a little bit harder to kind of grade them in the same way because the
Sure.
big stories that these are telling kind of give them that extra boost. I mean, there's
Right.
some amazing, but Legion about Alpha Legion, but again, it's got lots of human element stories and it's just an incredible book, really incredible book, which you can read kind of standalone in some ways, but nothing quite sort of lives up for me anyway to
Mm.
these first five, and these are the ones I go back and read again and again, and they got that kind of comfort feel now because they give you that nostalgic buzz each time from the books, but also that nostalgia I got about 40k from reading the first one. So you get that double whammy of it, where there'll be lots in the middle that I will probably they haven't had a second read, and won't get a second read. I don't
Sure.
think.
I think there's just another thing with the remembrances and the inclusion of those.
Mm,
This that the presence of them speaks to how the intention was for the Great Crusade to be about like mythic narratives and great heroes doing incredible things, which obviously is what this saga is about. And the fact that Horus Rising actually starts with someone telling a story. I was there the day Horus slew the Emperor. Like, so the whole thing is framed as people telling stories, and it's all about telling epic stories. And they even talk
yeah.
about how, that story is retold and embellished and like he tells it to everybody, and it's slightly different, or things might not be quite true. That's also just really nice for a
Mm,
40k saga, an
yes.
epic, origin story for the Imperium and the Emperor and the universe, for it to all be framed around that in inconsistency and unreliability of narrators and
Yeah.
storytellers. So actually, although it's written as a factual account, this is what happened, it's all right there to be, well, this is someone telling a story of what happened. So is it what happened? Or is this a remembrancer telling this tale?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. That runs throughout. And you mentioned saga, and I think I've just got me thinking about these first five books are that epic tale, that epic saga, that prequel. And as we move into the middle books of the
Mm.
series, I think what probably fundamentally changes is that they're not telling a prequel story anymore. They're filling out what has become a setting
Right.
for a game.
Sure.
And I think maybe partly deliberate, maybe unwitting in many ways at all, it changes what you're writing and what you're trying to do because you started this wonderful epic tale, but you've almost making sure that it becomes more epic and takes longer, and you're
Mhm.
filling in all of the gaps, and maybe too many of the gaps. Sometimes you fill in too many little stories, but
Yeah, that's a
there
fascinating
are
point.
elements all the way through though. There are good books and plenty of good books that call back to these characters,
Mm,
especially the human characters, and the importance of what they're doing here continues right through to the end. So it's never lost completely. But
sure.
like anything, the excitement of something at the beginning, the excitement of a new relationship, whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship, there's nothing quite like that kind of, oh my God, it's like when you first start a new army,
Mm,
if we're going to use a wargaming example rather than something else. These books were that exciting period, that new thing that this is going to be epic, this is going to be brilliant. And that'll always change. That'll always plateau out when
mm.
you get down to the normal mundane of getting through the core of a series. There's some great moments, but also a lot of bits that just need to happen because they need to tell that story. So you do lose that a little bit.
Sure. I think that's a really interesting point just about how the meta has changed.
Mm.
So yeah, that when these books first started, when this series first started, it was written in relation to 40K. By the time it ended, it has its entire own game and universe and miniatures and all sorts. So it's no longer being written necessarily in relation to 40K. It's being written in relation to Horus Heresy, the game, which inevitably will like color the choices and the narratives and like you
Hmm.
say, what stories get chosen to be told. So that's just an interesting thing and almost inevitable when you're publishing a series that long over 20 plus years. The world around them is going to change. So, I'd love to know when they sat down to start writing Horus Rising, if they were like, okay, here's where this ends. We think we've got 5 books in us. We think we've got 10 books in us. We think we're going to have this done by Christmas or whatever. Like what was the initial thought
I think
around?
it's talked about, actually. I think it has been talked about. You have to dig out interviews from a long time ago.
Right.
But I can't remember what they said, but it was obviously nowhere near what we've ended up with. It was much shorter.
Sure.
And there was a point where they could see the success, especially after these, where they're like, whoa, okay, we are going to take our time and we're going to really put an awful lot of love and backstory. It wasn't just
Mm,
about financially making it last longer. Well, these have been successful, so now we can afford to spend more time really building these origin stories for these legions that we never thought we'd be able to tell. So we
mm,
are going to tell you all about almost feudal lands where the Dark Angels are and where they get their knightly stuff from.
right.
We are Bretonia in space elements of at times in those early stories, and it's great. But I think there was a period there where they lost their way with that a little bit as well because they were just taking too long,
Mm,
and then corrected a little bit again and brought things back more towards a narrative heresy story. But and some of the actual landmark campaign
mm.
battles on the way to Terra.
Sure.
So you see, if you, not that you will, but if you ever read the series, you would probably pick up on those moments when you're thinking, okay, this has gone in a weird direction. This has gone way back in time. We get a lot more Great Crusade stuff because every legion seems to have its kind of origin story moment to a certain extent. And there's some really good campaign stuff.
Mm,
So it
yeah.
goes all over the place.
It's an interesting, just broader point, I suppose, around. So, like, this was good epic storytelling for 40K. It's a set of books ostensibly for 40K, even though it's set 10,000 years before. But that is kind of weirdly disjointed, right? So, like, even like I was saying, I've seen people talk about how Horus Rising or the Horus Heresy series are like the narrative of 40K, or this is the way to get into 40K and to understand the lore is to read the Horus Heresy books. But they are about a different setting. They're about 30K. They're about
Yeah.
this prehistory. They are about a load of characters who, well, mostly until recently, are not around anymore. They're about legions that don't exist in the same way anymore. They focus on particular Astartes that are not, the main characters of 40K. Like it's really super different in many ways. Yeah, it obviously shares loads as well, but it's really different. And it's kind of it's almost a shame in a way that there isn't a similarly well written, well executed like narrative and series of critically acclaimed novels in 40k. I mean, maybe that's a foolish thing to think of.
Hmm.
Maybe 40k is for the battle game, and the stories don't need to. But you can play Horus Heresy as a battle game as well now, and you could still have this amazing narrative,
Yeah.
which is almost why it's and the Scouring, which is the new sort of sequel series to Horus Heresy,
Hmm.
maybe, and I might read it, I might follow it. Maybe that would have been a cool opportunity to say, well, let's bring to bear all of the magnificent work we did for Horus Heresy. Let's bring that to bear for 40k and tell an actual 40k narrative and a series of amazing novels in 40k now that we've done it for 30k.
I think a couple of points on that. I think there are examples of where they've tried it.
Mm,
I've not read it, but I've heard that the Beast that Rises series was an attempt to try and put a sort of an epic story together in a more detailed sort of series of books. I don't
mm,
know, 9 books or something. I think some of the when we got 8th edition 40k, I think some of the sort of more originy Primaris stories when
yeah.
Guilliman comes back and stuff, I think there was an element there. I remember I started to read one and there was a bit of prehistory built into that with Fulgrim involved fighting with Gilliman, and it was well written. It was good. So I think that they got close to it then, and you've definitely got writers that were involved in writing later heresy books, Guy Haley examples. So I think they've touched on it, but they've never really put it together in a big series. And then maybe they would argue that they are telling a current narrative
Yeah,
in 40k, and
possibly.
maybe
Yeah.
we're just not into it,
Yeah,
and
that's
that's why
fair. That's fair.
we don't react with it and interact with it in the same way because I'm going to make an assumption that you, a bit like me, don't find the modern day 40k lore quite as exciting as I would have done in the past. I don't follow it as closely. I'm not super engaged. I'm
Yeah,
not
I've
looking to
not
see what
crossed
the
the
next story is.
Rubicon
Yeah.
in that way. Yeah, I think that's fair to
And it
say.
might be great, so maybe we are missing out.
Possibly.
And
Yeah.
I've read the odd book, with the odd modern 40k book, and some of them have been really very good as well. So there might be an element to that as well. I think Scouring will be different. I think it is very much just going to be a continuation of this style of book from the
Mm.
same writers. We are talking day after
Yeah, the
the
next
siege.
day.
This is going to start. It is next day, and I'm in the middle of reading a compilation, one of the latest ones to do with the siege series at the moment, and that's got a couple of shorts that are based just after Horus has been killed. Sorry, spoilers, anyone who, um, and and that's quite interesting as well. And it does interest me because I've read all of this. I'm invested. I kind of want to know. I
Mm.
really want to know about Dawn and Gilliman arguing about what to do now, and when do they realise that the state the Emperor is in? I want to see the moment when they go, okay, well, he's on the throne now. Is he going to prop him up with a couple of cushions? Is he? I want to see all of that kind of stuff. You get elements of it, obviously, at the end of the Siege books, but that realization of, oh, yeah, well, we haven't quite got the technology to fix him yet, but he's all right, isn't he? Yeah, right. What do we? I find it really interesting, and again,
Mm.
that's more about the politics of the period than the war stuff, which I find really interesting. So I think Scouring's going to be good, but it won't be what you've described for that
Sure.
reason because it's still too far away from 40k.
Yeah.
Um, so I think they probably argue that they are telling that story, but it just doesn't feel like it. Maybe it feels a little bit disparate and all over the place, and books to match a certain release, maybe, or a certain new edition story arc or something. I don't know.
Sure.
I guess people will put in the comments, people to read those books. Maybe there is a really good narrative arc, 4 or 5 books that are worth reading that will give us that kind of because it interests me enough that if I knew they were well written, I would read a series of 40k novels if they went together and it gave me some more knowledge about what's going on in 40k now
Sure.
because I wouldn't know where to really start, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that does make sense, and you're totally right. And folks absolutely should put in the comments if there is, if there are a series of novels that I'm sleeping on, then call them out because yeah, I still love 40K as a setting, and I think there's some really cool stuff in it and some cool stories to tell. I mean, one thing that I did want to mention actually from Fulgrim was just Eldrad, and
Mm,
that's a really fun. I like Eldar. I like a bit of Eldar storytelling. So to be able to like have them intersect with the Horus Heresy as well,
it's a
and it's quite
brilliant scene
nicely
as well,
done.
isn't it? The fight
Yeah,
scene is.
it
This
is.
is another reason why you need to go and read all of the perpetual stuff and then the
Right.
cabal stuff and the Alpha Legion stuff a little bit as well because he comes back again and he pops up quite a few times because there's lots of different agendas going on here
Well, I really
about
like
working
that.
towards
Yeah.
the outcome of this heresy and
Yeah.
about the perpetuals and the cabal and all these other forces as well that aren't maybe chaos that have a have some kind of influence or
Mm.
want to have influence on the outcome. And I think you would absolutely love that. So again, maybe someone in the comments who's really familiar with the series could pick out the series of books you'd need to read to follow that story arc.
Right. Yeah,
I
that
can
would be
think of
fun.
some, but there'll be some. It's so long since I read them. There'll be a few that I'd forget because I think you'd enjoy them.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I like that he wanted to intervene because he knew
Mm,
how bad Horus was going to be and the darkness that's going to come from the betrayal that's about to unfold, and the fact that the entity that has Fulgrim had masked his intentions and sort of and had prevented Eldrad from understanding what was really taking place. Like
yeah.
that's all good stuff. I like all of that, and the sudden betrayal, and but even just having the Eldar present and aware, it's
Mm,
better than just like that no one else was around, no one was in the neighborhood, and didn't get
yeah.
involved. Like it just makes more sense to me that they would have at least
I
understood
love it.
what
I
was
love
taking
seeing the other
place.
Xenos in the early books
Yeah,
as well. I mean,
completely. Yeah,
I would love to play a Great Crusade version of the game. I wish there were rules for Xenos.
that would be fun.
I
Yeah,
would. That would
yeah.
be
Because
amazing. Yeah.
one of the things that I think is really fun in these books is how like pulpy they are willing to get with the random Xenos races that the Great Crusade is against. So they're just fully going into whether it's the like mega arachnids, and like and just like snake people, the lair, just fully going into what I mean, I would imagine like 50s sci-fi
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff and like proper pulpy kind of enemies. And even like worlds that could easily have been a place they visited in the original series of Star Trek.
I
You
was
can
just gonna say
imagine,
it sounds like
yeah,
Star Trek.
absolutely. And they go to a world that's just full of Greek statues for some reason, and like stuff like that.
Well,
That's
we come in
really
peace,
fun.
shoot to kill kind of sums up the Great Crusade, doesn't it?
Sure. Yeah, but like all of that is really, really good. I enjoy that. I enjoy just embracing the kind of pulp sci-fi origins that, played a role in the creation of 40K originally. So that really feels like it honors that
Hmm.
aspect of things. It is really nice. And again, it's a good way to highlight just how bad the Astartes, the Great Crusade, the Emperor, Horus, and pals. Like they're not. They're out there just fully like, well, we were gonna have to subjugate these people to bring them into line. Like we've already given this world its like new name based on the fact that we're so confident that we're going to completely demolish any resistance and take it over and bring it back into the Imperium. So like it's
Yeah.
already claimed even before they've set foot on the planet. Like stuff like that, I think is really good. It speaks to yeah, obviously where Horus goes and where Fulgrim and Mortarion go is an incredibly dark place, but they were starting from a dark place already. It just was
Yeah.
masked by like this illusion of nobility and order and goodness because it's all in the name of the emperor who's a quote unquote good guy.
Yes. He's clearly not.
Yeah, he's clearly not. He's clearly not.
No.
Um, but yeah, I mean, fantastic. I'm very. very pleased to have read them finally, and to have, and dipped my toes into a really good set of stories, some really well written stuff, some really great character moments, and like, there is nobility, there is like tension, there is cool stuff, there is shocking betrayal. It's, knowing it's coming didn't dampen the impact of
Hmm.
seeing some of those scenes. So I think it's a big success. For me, I'd give a thumbs up to the Horus Heresy series of novels, the first five at least. I'm assuming that you would as well, Stu.
Yeah, absolutely. Those five books are up there with some of my all-time favorite books in general. So
Right,
really, really
good.
enjoy them.
Who knows? If people enjoyed this, maybe we'll come back and do the next five or the next
And don't do the
50.
next five.
Maybe we'll do the perpetuals, or we'll do some other sequence from within the Horus Heresy. But yeah, I
One
mean
or two
that's.
of the next five would be all right, but some of the next five I'd just leave.
But it's been fun to read them. It's been fun to chat about them. So thank you so much for suggesting it, Stu. Um,
Mhm.
I guess we've probably talked long enough for now about the Horus Heresies, so we can leave folks here. But where can people find you online, Stu?
Miniature Realms. Just Miniature Realms. YouTube first, please, but yeah, everywhere else as well.
Well, we'll include all of your links in the description down below. I'm Jordan Sorcery pretty much everywhere. So all of those links will be down in the description below as well. I think we've got some more fun book clubs to come for the rest of the year. We're planning a fun Halloween appropriate book club. I'm quite looking forward to that. Revisiting an old friend from the
Hmm.
early days of Warhammer fiction. I'm very excited. Very much looking forward to that. And we've got some other cool stuff as well that we're going to be reading before the year is out. But until next time, thank you everybody for joining us. I'm Jordan, and this is Jordan Sorcery.